Here with us now from Washington, Israeli ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Ron Dermer.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us. The President of France is taking some steps, pushing back against anti-Semitism that has really infected that country for some time. Is he doing enough?
Well, he's trying, but you're right. There's been a rising tide of anti-Semitism in France for some time. 3 years ago, 1,900 Jews in France moved to Israel. 2 years ago, 3,500 Jews moved. Last year, 7,000 Jews. This year, we're expecting 15,000 Jews, French Jews, to move to Israel. Now, that's a community.
And Mr. Ambassador, it's not obviously we noticed what happened this past week across the globe. Took great notice of the attacks against the cartoonists, not as much against the 4 Jews who were slaughtered in a kosher supermarket, but there have been violent attacks against Jews and murders against Jews in France before that really hasn't gained the attention, has it?
That's correct. 2 years ago, you had an attack on a school in Toulouse, France, where terrorists on a motorcycle came in and killed an adult and 3 children. He took an 8-year-old by the hair and shot her at point-blank range. You didn't see a mass rally against that. There were a lot of statements that were made at the time of everything that would be done to protect the Jews of France, but unfortunately it didn't happen. We appreciate the comments that were made by the President of France, Hollande, by the Prime Minister of France. There have been European leaders who have taken a very strong stand against anti-Semitism, like Chancellor Merkel in Germany. But, you know, Europe is a place with a lot of old traditions, Joe, and anti-Semitism is probably the oldest one.
We were talking about that earlier. Again, there always seems, Ian, to be an excuse in Europe to be anti-Semitic. And right now, it's a Palestinian conflict, but you can go back 500, 600 years, 700 years, and there is always an excuse.
Well, immigration in Europe in general has always been much more about cultural issues than it has been about political ideology. In France, you can be a communist, but you can still be French.
Right.
In the United States, that'd be anti-American. But, you know, you can sound, you can have a different accent, you can look a little different in the U.S., you can still be American. That's a lot harder in a lot of the countries in Europe, and I think that's a problem for the Jews. Ambassador, I wanted to ask you on this, there's been a lot of interesting story around Netanyahu's attendance in France. The fact that President Hollande actually, sort of was basically said, it's not a convenient time for you to come right now. And then Netanyahu himself actually talking about that the Jews are welcome in Israel if they're not in France. It feels a little raw. I mean, do you feel like there's just tensions just got too high around this and it's time to back off a bit, or were these the appropriate messages from both the French and the Israelis at this point?
Well, look, I think the Prime Minister of Israel did exactly what a Prime Minister of Israel has to do. First, we have to stand with France when they're fighting against terrorism. And those reports about Hollande not wanting him there, those were just not true. It's sort of an internal Israeli story. But the Prime Minister felt a moral obligation. We asked the world to stand with Israel in our battle against terrorism. We think we're fighting that same battle in Israel at home against militant Islam that France is fighting in Europe. So it was important for the Prime Minister of Israel to stand with France in its hour of need. And the other thing that a Prime Minister of Israel always believes in and always says, all Prime Minister of Israel since the founding of the state, is that every Jew in the world should know that they always have a home in Israel. Jews should be protected wherever they are, whether it's in France or whether it's in the United States. But Jews around the world should know that they can always come to Israel. In Israel, the Jewish people do not ask others to defend them. In Israel, the Jewish people defend themselves.
Ambassador Dermer, stay with us. We want to get the perspective from France right now.